Microsoft recently announced the Xbox One S All-Digital Edition, which removes the disk drive. Like it sounds, this console will only play digital games, making Microsoft the first console manufacturer to take the plunge into a digital-only console future. We also recently saw a fancy press conference from Google detailing how Stadia, the company's upcoming streaming service, will go a step further and remove any need for a console altogether. Sony has also announced details recently about their next-gen console, so we know that hardware won't completely disappear in the next generation. But what about actual, tangible games? Hey, welcome to Viewpoints, a show where we discuss our takes on the latest surrounding the world of games. Today, I'm joined by Heather Alexandra.
Hello, world.
Thank you for being here.
Hey.
So, we were all weary 6 years ago when Microsoft announced their always online console and all this weird stuff, but yet here we are again.
I was gonna say weary is a really polite way of putting it.
Yeah. But here we are again, and with the announcement of the Xbox One S All-Digital Edition. The SAD, and Stadia on the horizon as well. I'm curious about discs and cartridges, and if they will suffer the same fate as most other forms of digital media.
I don't know about you, I still watch stuff on Laserdisc all the time.
Oh yeah? Me too.
That's No, so digital future, I think there's a good argument to be had that we're already partially there. The fact of the matter is that when I get stuff for my Xbox One for work or whatever, the reality of what I do for work means that it's codes or whatever, which means that it's all digital. But if I want to buy something, most of the time it's all digital. I didn't go out to GameStop or wherever and buy my copy of Sekiro, even though that's probably one of my favorite games of the year and one of the games I was the most excited about. I downloaded that. So I think to a certain extent, that crossover is already happening in the same way that for audio stuff, we didn't see the full, complete degradation of compact discs, CDs, until a little later on. But we still had MP3 players. We still had our Zunes.
Wow,
our Zunes and our old school iPods and stuff. And when those first started happening, that didn't kill off CDs right away. And CDs are still around,
sure.
But you wouldn't say that. For music, we're pretty much already there. And I think games are at a point where they're probably going to follow, whether or not we want them to or not.
Yeah, I think music's an interesting example because I stream everything, I download everything using Spotify for the most part. But I do collect vinyl, and it's a weird sort of old-fashioned hobby of mine, collector hobby of mine, where if there's an album I love, I gotta get it on wax.
We don't have a great digital equivalent to that though, unless we're talking about things like making sure you're playing old games on a CRT or something, right?
That's true.
Our version of having vinyl is so much stranger because games are both audio and video and all these other things. So, we do see cases now where certain older games get re-releases on cartridges or things like that. But there's that difference between the convenience of Spotify and then, what people would tell you about vinyl of oh, I wanted this on vinyl for a certain sound quality or things like that. We have versions of that in gaming, but it's not as convenient to maintain, to actually stick with physical media, even older physical media. When I say old, I mean the PlayStation, the first PlayStation, that still takes work today, even now. If I want to play original hardware stuff and I want to stream Skies of Arcadia, because of course I would.
Sure.
I have to put my Dreamcast through an upscaler. Or just versions that aren't quite what they are when we have the digital versions of them. So all the Final Fantasy ports being kind of a little screwy because Square Enix kind of sucks at that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why you would want to go back to physical, because the digital stuff you have available is not as
great.
Good. It's just not as good.
Totally.
But as it becomes harder to maintain that physical media, the thing that we'll have access to is the not as good version, which sucks.
In the interest of the show, I'm going to play a little bit of the devil's advocate role. I'll put my devil's advocate hat on. But so we both live in New York City, where space is a precious and valued commodity and resource. Wouldn't we kind of want a digital-only future, though, and not having stacks of cases piled up somewhere or cartridges, boxes?
I have completely fessed up to the fact that I am interested in this digital-only Xbox. I kind of mentioned it earlier in our discussion, just because of the convenience of it.
Sure.
In order for me to keep up with all of the things that I want to keep up with, PlayStation, Xbox, to have my older consoles, which I do, that's a lot of space. And I live in a closet in Brooklyn, right? So there's two components of, why people would be compelled by digital only. And one is just the convenience of potentially having access to something so long as you have an internet connection. And then also is just, it doesn't take up as much space.
Right.
I don't need to have my weird YouTuber background shelf of like all my collector's stuff. Even though that's fine. Like if you want to have that, have that. But for some people, it's like, oh, I can pre-download a thing and have it at midnight.
Yeah.
And that's good. And also I don't have to have 9 new boxes on my shelf.
I think that's what's so interesting about at least game consumption, right? Because like so much of it is, sold to players as like, get the collector's edition of this with the statue and this, metallic case, and
sure
if you want, right? But there are numbers there to sort of back up the fact that digital sales are on the rise, and that's why these consoles are coming out with more storage space. And you could argue when you buy a disc, you're basically just buying a thing that will install it on another machine. You're kind of moving that data from one thing to another, right? But so it's sort of becoming a bit of the norm already. I mean, should players care about preservation?
Yeah, I don't have the words for how much they should care about that, but they should, right? Like, I maintain collections of certain games, of materials, of code, of things like that. I just do, because having access to those things is important. And that also means having access to physical copies of the games. It means having scans of magazine stuff. Like what we talk about when we talk about preservation is huge.
Sure.
But physical media is a component of that in the sense that, like, if I have a game, if, the thing that we talk about all the time when we talk about our fears about digital features, the example that we always think of is PT.
Right.
PT's on my drive. If Konami was like, hey, we actually want to just like turn that stuff off, or like, because they yanked it from the store so you can't get it, but if they wanted to go even further, I'm sure there's a way they could talk to Sony and just be like, get that shit out of there. And that's terrifying because that's like an important thing, not just because it was quote unquote important to developers, but because it was a sort of part of the history of a franchise.
Sure.
An abortive part, but still an important part. The idea, that when I buy something digitally, I'm not really buying the thing. I'm buying my license or like my access to the thing, so long as like a company arbitrarily decides it's in their interest to have that thing around, is terrifying. I mentioned the Capcom thing. Like here's an arcade stick with arcade games, but it's like a handful of games. Or the new Sega console that they're doing. There's gonna be a point where they are not, I won't have access to those, or there's other old games already that I just don't have easy access to. Well, that's not true. You can get anything online.
That's true.
But, I mean, in theory, I don't have easy access to these things, and it's frustrating to see companies both not really maintain or provide access to their older games and curate proper, libraries, and then also to move our current generation of games closer to something that's more ephemeral and like less tangible. It's like really scary.
Yeah, that's what makes this all digital Xbox One S so fascinating to me, is because we're starting to see what's been happening with like laptops and other mobile devices for so long, where it's like most people don't use this thing, this drive, right? We're going to rip it out, make it cheaper to mass produce and make it cheaper for the consumer. And anybody who wants that drive, they can buy an optional thing on the side, and if they still want that. So I'm curious if, like you just said a second ago, what the answer is moving forward that could replace the Switch cartridges or a CD or a disc, rather.
I mean, I don't know. I think the thing that scares me talking about preservation, just jumping back for a second, in terms of what it means to have digital only, is that I'm super afraid that companies are just going to curate what they think is like an important canon of games and provide access to only those things, and then that's all we have. And finding an alternative way to store those things would be great, or just giving, they would never do this because of the implications of it, but giving us a means to make our own physical media of that would be great. Anything besides just stressing digital only, stressing streaming, right? Part of what's happening with all these digital only moves is that they're also secretly pivoting closer and closer to streaming. Right. Part of the reason we see a digital only Xbox is because there's definitely an exploratory committee or even more stuff going on at Microsoft that says, hey, we should do what Google's doing.
Right.
We should have our own streaming service. We should, but we see it with streaming services. Like Netflix fucking sucks.
Yeah.
Like it used to be great because that was where you could go to get things, or you would go there and you just have stuff mailed to you. And now you go there and you say, I'm going to have this show that I'm going to watch. Thank God it's on Netflix. And then like next month they're like, actually, no, it's on Hulu now. No, it's on
Disney.
Vimeo 2 point. I don't even know what the hell
Live
these things
leak.
are. Like it's bullshit. So if we had a bunch of services, ignoring the fact that just like going to digital only is scary. If we had service run stuff that was just like, here's Google Stadia, here's Microsoft, Game Pass Plus, whatever the hell, like that's screwed up.
Yeah.
It's not good. I don't like it. Even as I say like, oh, it's very convenient for me to have this digital only Xbox. The idea that companies would curate what's available and intentionally or not, deny access to games that are of interest, games that are just fun,
Right.
or like historically important. It's like my worst nightmare.
Yeah, convenience can be a killer.
Yeah, I mean we love convenience. That's why we hate storefronts.
Let us know what you think in the comments down below. Is convenience more important than preservation? Thanks for watching.